listen to a lot of podcasts. And one of the things that you learn when you listen to a lot of podcasts is what kind of things make it sound good and maybe what makes it sound not so good. So that's what we're here to tell you guys today. It's basically what radio should be doing.
Podcasting is exactly what radio should be doing. Because the way you look at podcasting is a whole lot like Netflix for radio. How many people still sit at home and wait until their TV program comes on? Not very many. Most of us watch it on Netflix or catch it on Hulu or something like that. Well, that's what podcasting is for radio. It lets people listen to what they want to when they want to listen to it.
And podcasts are also helpful for helping us get our voices out there, get our issues out into the community. We can hear each other, we can hear different perspectives, and we can hear from people who are a lot like us. This is very important. We need more podcasts. I know there's a lot of them out there. We need more voices, more people to share their stories and to tell everybody what they're about.
The thing about a podcast is you can do a podcast on whatever drives your passion. And the first thing that you're going to do when you do that is you're going to find out that, wow, I thought there were maybe 10 or 15 people in the whole world who cared about this. And you're going to find out there's hundreds, maybe even thousands, maybe even tens of thousands of people who share the same passion that you do.
And that's the really important part, is sharing your passion. You know, you can have a podcast where you talk about, general interest things, and there's lots of those out there and very well done. But you're going to sound your best, you're going to give your best information if you're talking about something that you care about a lot, something that you're very passionate and maybe a bit knowledgeable about. So let's start with sound. How do you make something sound good?
I call this sound doctrine. So did you get that? This is our first studio. It was actually in our studio apartment, a 420 square foot studio apartment. And we have the corner of the studio dedicated to our podcast studio. And you'll notice the stuff hanging on the wall, that's acoustic material. It's not expensive, but it lets you have that tight sound. If you're in an echoey room, let me do something here. Hear that echo of all these walls? You barely hear it now, because by the time you mix that sound down, you're going to have sound that just makes it hard to understand. So controlling your room variables. You want to start in a quiet room. No air conditioner running, no refrigerator running, no dishwasher running. Anything else should be running at least in a quiet atmosphere. Because you're thinking about your listener. You want them to be able to hear it cleanly and easily without having to work to understand what it is that you're saying.
I think the biggest key to that is to remember soft surfaces, things that are not hard and flat that reflect stuff, even if you have to improvise a little bit, which brings us to our next studio.
This guy wasn't very impressed to be in our closet. When we upgraded from the little bitty corner of our studio, apartment studio, laugh went into the closet. Literally, it's a walk-in closet, and as you can see, we still have the acoustic material there. And yes, that is my AC/DC shirt hanging right next to Mr. Shermer's head. He was not impressed with that, as you can tell. But it sucks up the sound. It was the quietest studio I've ever worked in. It's even quieter than the one we use now. And we had special sonic treatment for the ceiling.
Yeah, we actually, our secret weapon with that was the staple gun. We had a bunch of old pillows, random soft fuzzy things, and where the room wasn't covered by all these shirts hanging on hangers, we had to...
Are you there?
So we stapled a bunch of stuff to the ceiling. You walked in, you could see a bright pink body pillow hanging off of the ceiling. We had all the clothes everywhere pushed together as tightly as we could. Those soft surfaces made it sound really awesome, even if it looked a little unimpressive. So this brings us to our next room. We soundproofed a real studio with some pretty real equipment.
We actually got a storage room in the business center of our apartment building. And what this is over here, and I know I'm going into a little bit of detail here, but if you get the sound quality done right, you're a million miles ahead of 90% of what's out there. That gray stuff on the bottom, that's rockwood. And the EMP, Experience Music Project, it's got every interior wall is covered with that. And the purpose is for sound control. Because in every room they have different kinds of music playing, different kind of noise being made. And this gives them isolation. And that's what you want when you're recording multiple voices and trying to put them on the radio. The other stuff here, RLX, we'll show you what we do with that. The RLX stapled on the wall, that's a little bit of overkill for a podcast studio, but it works to give you excellent sound. Deanna came up with a plan for how big the rock wool looks good.
Yeah, and you could actually cover all of your walls in the rock wool. You don't have to have the fancy studio foam. But what I did is I took the cheapest material I could find, which is felt at the fabric store. And we wrapped the felt with safety pins, and we actually Velcroed those panels to the wall, because felt and Velcro definitely go together well. That stuff sucks up sound so well because it's similar to that fuzzy pink insulation that comes in rolls, only instead of spun fiberglass, it's spun rock. So it's very dense and sound can't get through it and can't mess with it. And it ends up looking pretty good when you can jerry-rig a few things with it. And so here's what the studio looks like in full.
And that brings us to the next thing. Once you've got your sound, your room quiet, your room where it's going to be tight sounding, microphones. You know, a lot of podcasts that I've heard are recorded on a laptop microphone, sitting down on the table, and someone's sitting away. And then you bring Skype into the picture, you got two people at different locations and their speakers are blaring, and it's hard to understand anything that they're saying. When you upgrade and take it up a step, and here, like I say, we've got 4 or 5 mics there, that's because we like to do kind of bring in several people. We can have 4 people in the studio, 2 people online. That's way more than you need on a podcast. But the microphones give you a good quality. These, they look expensive. They're not. They're 49 bucks. You don't have to spend a whole lot of money to do it. They're MXL, large capsule condenser mics, and you can spend as much as you want on a mic. But in all honesty, for a podcast, this is going to give you great sound, and it's not going to cost you a whole lot of money.
And another important thing to note about this picture is the table surface and that cabinet. We covered those in sound-absorbing material as well. That way there's no chance of echo. Yeah, it's a little overkill, but it really does the trick. Also, the microphones are mounted on arms with what's called shock mounts. Those basically suspend the microphone in a little rubber bandy type surface. And so if someone's sitting at the table and they're talking with their hands and they bonk the table or they're typing on a laptop, none of that movement gets translated up through into sound on the microphone, so you don't have any of those awkward noises. And here, this is one of our favorite additions. We just put this in. It's a microphone shield, and it does just what it sounds like. It shields the microphone from other voices in the room.
When you've got several people talking, this gives you an opportunity to individually track the people that you're recording so that you can edit separately. And say someone coughs while someone else is speaking, you can take that completely out. You can totally kill that. So you hear the one person talking. I know it sounds like overkill, but the idea is we're trying to communicate something to people and trying to make something that people will want to listen to. And the best place to start is with good sound quality.
Here's another ingredient that you're going to need in your podcast soup, a mixer.
For most podcasts, this is probably the only mixer you've got to need. It takes 2 sources in and gives you 2 sources out. That lets you have 2 voices. You can have yourself and someone on Skype, or yourself and someone in the studio. If 2 voices is all you need, that's what you need. It's going to be great sound quality. It's not going to cost a lot of money. Leave it at 49 bucks right there. So far, you're looking at 150 bucks, 2 microphones in your mixer. It's not an expensive thing, but the right equipment makes a difference. This is the guy that you use for a big podcast. If you've got a podcast that's going to involve a lot of people, this is one that we recommend highly. It's the Elisa's. It gives you the capability of tracking 10 channels at one time. You don't need that many again for a podcast, but what you do get out of this is the ability to do more than what you want to do. Yeah, it's not expensive. It's one more expensive in our studio. It's about $199. Catch it refurbed at Elisa's website for $100.
Yeah, and the great thing about it is the options are not just microphone inputs. You can also just plug in, for instance, another source. We interview people on Skype, so you can plug the phone with Skype. Boop, right into the mixer.
Biggest trick that all of you got to have a guest and they're going to join you on Skype. We invest $11 in every single episode we do. We send them a headset. And the reason for that is you want your guests to sound as good as you sound. You want them to sound like they're right there with you. So you send them something like that. That way they're not sitting there talking on the laptop and having echoing noise and all of that. The headset's going to help you a whole lot with that. And we will have links on our website, livingafterfaith.com, to all of these things.
Another important thing about the headset situation is that it plugs in via USB. Your standard 3.5 millimeter little audio plug, especially if someone's on a laptop, and well, most people are on laptops these days. That plug actually picks up noise from inside of the laptop. You hear the fan noise. It's just a slight sort of zzz in the background. And so their sound comes in super, super clean. It sounds fabulous and very inexpensive.
Software, you have to have something to record it on. If you've got a multi-track, which we're going to talk about multi-tracking in a little bit, and some of this will be technical, but not a lot. You're going to need software that can record and edit. If you're using a PC-based, I recommend Audacity. It isn't exactly what I use because I got into audio editing way back before Audacity was available, but Audacity is a program that is shareware. It's cheap or free depending on how you're using it, and it will do everything you can possibly imagine to do on a podcast, including multi-track, mixing, editing, recording, everything to produce the MP3 file you need.
And another software ingredient that you're going to probably want is you need to know how to use Skype, Google Hangouts, anything with VoIP capabilities. When you have those guests on those $11 headsets, you want to have a really reliable connection. We use our cell phones with Skype on it, and so we actually end up with a pretty good feed. But you also want to make sure that your guest has a good connection. A lot of people will be on a Wi-Fi connection, and you know how those drop out. Maybe some of us have had some issues with Wi-Fi over the last few days. You end up with bad sound. You'll get a digital sort of Terminator quality to the person's voice. So making sure they have a good connection and that they have, at the very least, headphones that they're listening on, because the sound coming out of their speakers at them is going to pick back up on their microphone while they're talking to you. So it's like this loop of horrible feedback that ends up sounding kind of bad.
Things that we tell our guests, number one, is we send them the headset. We also ask them if they would find a quiet room that they can join us with, and we ask them to use a hardwired connection for whenever they're communicating to us on, because that Wi-Fi connection, again, gives us some issues.
Sometimes we send them in the closet. We'll tell them, do you have a closet you can go sit in? Because like our second studio, it's got great sound absorbing capabilities. Or if you can just get them to sit on a big couch in a bedroom, something like that, that will really improve the quality. No echoes through there.
This is an example of multi-track recording. What we've got there, Deanna's voice is that squiggly blue stuff on the top. That's her. We'll pull out her program. That's me underneath her, and that's our guest at the bottom. Now what you'll notice, we're way louder than they are. That's the reason that we track them separately, is so that before we ever mix this out, I can balance the levels and make it where everyone sounds at the same level. That's very important because the way you want to do it for your listener is make it where they never ever have to reach over and touch the volume of whatever they're listening to. You want all the levels to be the same. And the only way that you can accurately do that is through a multi-track process. Again, this is, I think, Soundforge, but Audacity and their programs for the Mac that do the exact same thing.
One of the important things when you're editing is to go through and listen to the whole thing as you go, because you're going to want to silence. You'll want to silence any extraneous noises, and anytime you have people near microphones, there's going to be burps, farts, chair noises, all sorts of stuff, especially while other people are talking. People have a tendency to fidget maybe a little bit, and so you can take those individual tracks and edit out where somebody, and just mute where someone is making an embarrassing noise, and then you have just clean sound all the way through.
Editing is the strength of making the podcast. What kind of separates them is how you edit that thing. And so many times you can do things in the studio knowing that you got to cut them out. For example, how many of you have heard someone in a podcast say, does anyone else have anything else to say? We do that too. We say it in every episode, but we cut that out. If someone says, yeah, I'd like to talk about such and such, we figure a way to bring a question into that, then we cut out all that chatter in the meantime. So it sounds like a smooth, produced program. And that's what your goal is.
You just sound like you really know what you're doing, but a lot of it is afterthought. Skype dropout, another important thing to edit out. Rich actually will take and edit a track when somebody has a little bit of a connection problem, and maybe a word will get drawn out with that weird digital noise, and he'll just chop it, make it shorter, and get it back together. But you can chop sentences out, you can ask your guests to repeat themselves, and then it will come through cleaner, get that all taken care of, and it doesn't sound like you had any problems, even if you spent the entire time swearing at your connection.
Nobody out there has to know that you had a problem. All the problems are hidden inside your studio and in your editing. Computer tech stuff. Now this is where, excuse me, you need someone who's technologically advanced. You can tell I have too much gray hair to be too much of a tech person. I understand the audio business, been in it all my life since I was 18 years old. But computer stuff is, it kind of escapes me. So if you can't, you can hire someone to do it, you can do it yourself. But what I did is I just found a great computer tech and married her, so I'm going to let her tell you all the computer stuff that you need to know.
He made a good choice. He has strengths that I don't. We use several different tools when you put a podcast together. Now, there's one option if you want to do it the easy way. There are hosts like podbean.com where you literally just upload your file and type in a little information, and it sends that out to the world. The problem is that you don't really have any flexibility. If you ever decide that you don't want to use that host anymore, people that have subscribed to your podcast through that address are going to miss your new episodes when you move on to another one. And it's very hard to tell people, hey, listener, we've moved to a new feed. Go to www. So you want to use a service that you probably can move around with. What we did is we took an intermediary, feedburner.com, that works with RSS feeds of all kinds, and a podcast is an RSS feed with an audio file attached. Just like a blog, it sends it to you. The RSS feed sends it to your iTunes, to your Zoom player, to whatever podcatcher you're using. And you'll want to have a website to base it off of. Now that's where you upload your files. We actually use an external host for our audio files because our website is based in Blogger. And Blogger doesn't actually host the space that those audio files take up. And if we want to move around later, FeedBurner keeps it all under one address.
One of the neat advantages, if you went with Blogger site or something like that, for our particular podcast, what we talk about is people who have come out of religion and are generally messed up because of it. I'm a PTSD patient suffering from religious abuse. And a lot of people we've talked to have similar stories, similar situations. So, in fact, over half, we can track the numbers, over half the people who listen to our podcast don't download it through an RSS or through an iTunes or anything like that. They go to the website, they listen to it there, and they clear their cache because they know that after they've listened to our podcast, they're still not out of the closet yet. Over half of our listeners still go to church on Sunday morning. Their bosses still think they're believers. They're in that place of trying to get out of religion and trying to find a way to make it happen. So this gives them an opportunity to listen without having their files and stuff where someone can pick up their phone and see that they've been listening to evil atheists.
Don't want that to show up in your list if your mom's still around. You want to talk about content?
Yeah, this is kind of what we rushed through that stuff, and I know that was boring. What we really want to talk about is how to talk to people and how to make a podcast that is exciting. What we do is we talk to an audience of one.
You may have heard a lot of shows, radio, podcasts. People will say, "Hey, all my listeners out there, how are you guys all doing? You know, all 5 of you," or they're very aware. They're talking to a crowd, but it really cements a personal connection with them. If you are talking to one person, you're only one person when you're listening.
When you think about it, people don't listen to 3 groups. You may have 10,000 people listening, but there are 10,000 people listening one at a time. Most of them in their earbuds, all alone. So your goal is to make that one person that you're talking to feel like you're talking directly to them. You want that one person to feel like, wow, they're connecting with me. I'm not talking to all y'all. I'm talking to you. And that makes a huge difference to the person listening.
A good example would be when you're saying something like, I bet you all out there know what I'm talking about when I say I've experienced this. You've kind of made it a statement to a general big group. If you change that one word, I bet you know what I'm talking about when I say I experienced this. You're talking to that one person. That's a connection. That's a real feeling that makes people love to listen to you. They feel like you're having a conversation with them.
And when you're talking to your guests, you want to make it a conversation much more so than an interview. And to have a conversation, it's important to think about what kind of questions you're going to ask. Do you like Apostacon?
Yes.
Do you like spaghetti?
Yes.
What's your favorite food?
Spaghetti.
Those questions kind of don't give you nowhere. But instead, you say, do you like Apostacon? And say, what do you like about Apostacon so far?
I love all the fabulous talks. There are so many people here to hug, and I got to eat pasta.
You got to eat pasta?
It was wonderful. Pasta's my favorite food.
Pasta is?
It is.
You see, you can have a conversation by just rephrasing your question. Yes, no questions. They tell you questions that can be answered with one word. Use how, why. Use questions like that to bring people to converse, to talk with you about things. The next thing, you want to let them talk. Let your people talk. The thing is, if you interrupt somebody in a live radio setting or something, hosts have to do that, man, because you've got a tight time schedule and all this kind of stuff. So we think, okay, he said his part, I got to get in and move on. But in a podcast, you can kind of edit and pause.
When you pause for a moment, you give your guest a second to say something else. How many times do you finish a sentence and then go, I have something else to say, but the other person has started talking? If you give like an extra long little pause, they may pick up and say something really cool that they didn't say in their original answer to you.
And no, your listener is never going to know that you paused, because you're going to cut that out. It's going to be nice and smooth and tight and sound like a beautiful conversation, even though you're doing everything you can to let your guest, your expert, whatever your person is, give their side, and tell their story. That's what you want to do, is draw their story out.
And using stories and emotion to connect people is a big part of that. I could say that, half of all people like to eat carrots, and you'd be like, whatever, okay, carrots. But if I said, I really love to eat carrots, they're my favorite food, I have such a good time when I eat carrots, I dip them in ranch dressing, I've just told you a story instead of giving you a really bare fact. You can use that as a basis of really drawing the listener in. They enjoy hearing stories. We humans are storytelling mammals. We are so drawn in and so susceptible to hearing how other people feel their experiences, as long as you tell it in a manner that emphasizes they've been here, they've gone there, they do this, they do that. It's fabulous. It's so much more engaging.
One of the wonderful things about podcasts is that they're out there as long as you leave them out there. In fact, they're out there longer than you leave them out there. If I had to call on my podcast now, I couldn't, because they're on people's MP3 players, they're on their computers, they're all over the place. There's not a thing that I can do to call those back. But that's the beautiful thing about podcasting, because it's not current. Sometimes people will hear something years after you said it, and that can be a touching thing.
And we got an email recently from someone who listened to a very old episode of ours. And this goes to show how long that content lives. They said, I know it's been a long time since you put your episode about PTSD out, but I just heard it today. Having been through leaving a cultish religion as well as surviving rape and molestation in my life, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you and this particular episode of the podcast. I've been previously diagnosed with PTSD, but never sought professional help. This has gone a long way toward encouraging me to do so. Thank you for specifically addressing the illusion that seeking help through counseling and medication means I'm not strong enough to recover on my own. Up to now, my stubbornness has made me try to get through this by myself. It's partly thanks to you that this is going to change. Do you guys see what I did there? I told a story.
And that story is not one. It's from our audience of one, but we received more than 100 similar emails from that episode from our audience of one, where people have either discovered that they had PTSD or finally realized that they need to be treated for PTSD. If you've had PTSD, you know about it, you've heard about it. It's not, when you hear that someone has decided to get treatment for it because of something you said, it means that someone's life is going to improve and someone may actually live longer as a result. And that episode is out there. People are very convinced now. That episode, in fact, was used after the Fukushima earthquake to help some of the survivors identify whether or not they had their cancer.
You know, we've also had a lot of feedback from our episode number 4 about sex. It was an opportunity not just to say religion can damage you sexually and make you feel guilty and question your sexuality and not know what's right and what's wrong, but we didn't just say that. We told Rich's story. We told personal experiences about how he's recovered from that. And that's helped a lot of people as well. They feel like they've connected with the story. They understand because they've been there as well.
They're giving us the high signs we need to move to marketing. How do you get people to listen to your podcast? Because there's a million of them out there. There's so many good ones. How do you stand out from the crowd? Once again, I have the expert.
One of the biggest issues, of course, is Google rankings. You want people to be able to find your show by Googling it. And so you want to make sure that your website and your podcast's RSS feed include lots of keywords that help tell people what your show is. That's a very bare minimum toward that. The other thing is that you want to get a lot of websites to link to your website because those outside links push you higher in the Google rankings. The more people that are visiting your site and linking to it actively, the better. So here's a sneaky little trick that isn't quite so sneaky. I've commented on a lot of blogs, I've read a lot of articles online, and they all have a space where you put name, website, email address, and the website link actually links your name to it. So if you make an interesting comment on somebody else's blog, somebody might click on your name and it takes you to your website. The other thing is that you can use the content that you have to help with explaining when you're commenting, when you're telling people things, and you don't want to be spammy. It's kind of a fine line. You have to use your own judgment. For instance, if somebody writes a blog article about PTSD, I can comment and say that, my husband and I talk about PTSD a lot. We interview people on a show that we have about PTSD. And it's from that I've learned this. And you're making a substantive comment. You're not just spamming. You're actually sharing what you've learned. That information not only is interesting to the reader, but that little website link in your sign-in will link that website back to yours. You'll end up with hundreds of websites linking to your website, and the Google rankings go up.
Another thing you want to do is ask every guest that you have on your show to share the link of that show, because they reach lots of people that you don't reach. I mean, I don't know how many Facebook friends I have, 1,000 or so. But they probably have 1,000 or so, 3,000 or 5,000. And only God knows how many Twitter followers they have. And how do you get them to share that? You just ask them to. And all but one person that we've asked has shared the podcast. And every time that we share and our guests share, we get more listeners.
And that's actually another quick point. There are a lot of people I wanted to interview, and I thought they would never talk to us. That person is far too famous to pay attention to a piddly little podcast like ours. But I learned long ago that the worst thing they can do is say no. And if you can get that famous person on your show, even if they're only internet famous, they can help you promote your show. And you don't want to use it as an opportunity to, I'm just going to bring this person on my show just because they're famous. You want them to be there to explain things and to share their stories that are relevant to your show. You want to keep it on topic.
I want to close with another email that we recently received. Our podcast deals with people who are broken, people who are hurting. And I received this actually while I was here. And he said, I wanted to send an email of encouragement for you and your wife. It's been therapy for me to realize that there's a light at the end of the faith tunnel. Listening to the struggle you went through and many of your guests has made mine a little easier. I listen to your podcast often, and it's a comfort to know that I'm not alone in this. You and others have shown me it's possible to make it through. And that is our listener of one. We have one listener. We talk to one person thousands of times every time we send out an episode. And the thing that you want to do, what makes it worthwhile, someone said that we do question and answers, and we talk about that, but the one question that everybody wants, can you make money on a podcast?
Unfortunately, the answer is no for now. And there's lots of little advertising things that people can do, and they'll bring in a little tiny bit of coin. But so far, not very many people have managed to monetize their podcast. So the reward, the monetary reward, not there, but the reward is that your one person has gotten some value out of what you've done. They've rewarded you with thanks, and that's probably the most important bit.
Thank you very much.